Boker Tov, today's daf is Daf Nun Vav. In Ksuba says we learn for four Shlema for Alosa ben Ruma and Yosef Asriel ben Chai Michal. We'll start with the 17th line on Daf Nun Vav Amar Aleph, the first two dots there where we left off yesterday. Boy Robin. According to Rav Meir Shapiro, we had a machlokus in our Mishnah between Rav Meir Shapiro and Chachamim. The person gives a ksuba, and there's tosfos also, not only the 200, but also an additional amount. And he gave it to her at the time of the Erusin or subsequent to the Erusin before the Nesuin. And then he dies or divorces her. What is she entitled to? The Chacham say she's entitled to the whole thing. Rav Meir says no, only to the Mana Masayim, only to the main amount. But the extra amount he only gave her, and that was what he said in Umdana. We understand, we assess his intentions, and we assume he only meant to give her the extra amount on the assumption that he was going to consummate the marriage. Well, what is considered consummation? Does it mamish bia or not? So Boy Robin, he asks, according to Nazari, let's say they went into the bridal chamber, to the chuppah, below nivala. There's also there's another machlokas we'll have elsewhere about what's the chuppah. Is the chuppah literally what we call the chuppah? You know, when they all gather and they have the chuppah there, the little hut or whatever you want to call that, the canopy. Is that the chuppah or is the chuppah the yichud room? But whatever it is, we'll call it the bridal chamber. So let's say they went into the bridal chamber, but he didn't have bia. He didn't have bia. And then let's assume now, let's say he divorced her then, or he died then, all of a sudden he had a heart attack and died. Is she entitled to the extra amount according to Lazar Lazar says that if she died, or if he died or divorced her after Erusin before the Nesuin, she doesn't get the tosus. What happens if they had the chuppah, but they didn't have bia? Below they didn't have bia. Now, what happens then? Chibas chuppah kona do we say that the kinyan, that as the union, the final kinyan of Nesuin, is that only affected by the attachment, the desire, the affectionate attachment of the chuppah, of the bridal chamber, or chibas chuppah kona is the kinyan affected with an e, affected by the affectionate attachment of the chuppah? They're going to the chuppah, they're in love. Oh, chibas bia kona, no, the affectionate attachment of the bia itself is what kinyan. So over here you could ask Akasha Korban I says you need Nesuin in order to get the tosefes, to get the extra amount. Well, what is Nesuin? Is Nesuin the chuppah? Is the chuppah alone? Is that what his intention was? Just going to the chuppah is okay. Now you could have all the money if he dies or divorces her, or does it mean literally the bia tashma? The son of Yosef Shlo Kosova El Chibas Lai Harishon. Yosef said a brisa which said that he only wrote her the extra amount with the understanding that they will have tremendous affection on the first night. Now, what do you mean? If you're talking about the affectionate attachment that's related with the bridal chamber, the chuppah, kona, and that's what's kona. It makes sense to say the chuppah. There's only one chuppah, and then he has bia subsequently that night. If you say chibas bia kona, v'layla rishon isa mikam ve'ach lesa, there's only bia the first night. He's only doing it for the first night. He's doing it because he's going to be with her many times. So what do you mean by that? It makes sense to say if it's the chuppah, it's what according to Lazar Nazaria, what makes the kinyan, what makes the final union that we call Nesuin, that he's totally attached, that she's totally attached to him. If it's the chuppah, that makes sense, the Laila Rishon. But if you say that it means the bia, why do you talk about the first night? It means for all the bias that he's going to have. So what it means the desire, the attachment of the chuppah, that affection that he shows to her at the chuppah. So chuppah b'layla used to be amam b'layla. Why talk about chuppah at night? You can't have a day wedding. Now they make a lot of weddings on a Friday morning because apparently it's cheaper at the caterer, right? So why do they have to have only the chuppah in the morning? And at night, why do you say? It says Yossi's Brisa said, Shelo kosova ela chibas layla harishon. They say it can't mean bia because bia is not just layla rishon. But if it means chuppah is also not dafka at night. So tamech bia b'layla isa bia mamalesa. So what do you want to say? It's the bia. It's not the chuppah because chuppah doesn't have to be at night. So it means bia. So bia also doesn't have to be at night. It could also be during the Hamarava. Imaya but based off, if it was a darkened room, mutter, you're allowed to have bia even during the day if it's a darkened room. It says holokasha or achara kamashma is just like the normal way. The bia b'layla, normal way is bia b'layla. It could mean that it's bia, but so it says layla rishon. Yes, it could be during the day, but usually it's at night. That's the normal way to do it. So ela chuppah kasha. So it makes sense to say, all right. It makes sense to say layla rishon refers to what you say. You could say it means that that layla means the normal way of having bia. So bia is not a problem, even though it doesn't have to be during the days. But it could, the chuppah layla rishon could refer to the bia. But how could it refer to the chuppah? Because chuppah doesn't have to be at night; it could be during the day. Chuppah nami lokash, keeping the stam chuppah labia kind of. Since the normal thing of having the chuppah means that they're going to have bia subsequent. So urachara kamashma and the belayla. So the chiddush is that normally you do it at night. Yes, you could have a chuppah during the day. You get a bia during the day. But the normal way is, since normally bia is at night, the chuppah is a prelude to that, so it's also at night. So the question stands really. We didn't answer the question: is what's konah? Is the chuppah? In other words, according to Rav Meir, that his intention was only to give her the tosefet at the time of Nesuin. Well, what makes the kinyan? Does the chibas chuppah konah? That's what it requires. In other words, we're not talking. It's not like the kedushin. The real kedushin is when he acquires her, he gives her money or a star or bia. Now she's owned him. She commits adultery. Now it's real adultery. She's really belongs to him. But what makes the final union, the final kinyan? Is it the affectionate attachment of the bridal chamber, or is it the affectionate attachment of actually having bia? So Gemara is not really posting that shell at this point. But another question comes up. Let's say. Now, the halacha, there's a machlokas about that, but l'maisa, there are many weddings that take place where the girl's a nida, and it didn't work out with the pills and all that kind of stuff, or they don't do it, whatever, and the girl's a nida. Nobody knows about it except for the Adim, because what do you have to do? And when she's a nida, she's not allowed to be secluded with him, to have yichud with him without a chaperone. So what happens is that the people at the wedding don't usually realize that there's an issue. They don't know. But when they go to the yichud room and two Adam are standing there to make sure they go to the yichud room, there's somebody inside the yichud room who's a chaperone. That's what you're supposed to do. In other words, they're not supposed to be alone, unchaperoned until they be. Once a person has been with his wife legitimately, afterwards, it becomes a need. In the normal course, a person is trusted to maintain his distance. But if they've never had bia yet, and she's a need, it's not allowed to have yichud with her. So let's say they went to the chuppah, and she was a nida right there, right afterwards, whatever. She was piercing them, and he didn't have bia with her, and then he died. Now, what would you say there? Even if you say that the first way we said before, that the attraction of the affection that he shows just having the chuppah, the affectionate attachment of just the chuppah itself is kona, but that's chuppah the chazal bia. That's because he knows he's going to bia right afterwards, right? Oh, we're going into the chuppah now. It's not the bia that he's intending. As soon as he goes into the chuppah, his intention is, she's mine and she can have all the tosefet. Even if you say that, but that's only if a chuppah that's going to have a bia. Of a chuppah the lo chazal. Let's say she's, in advance that they know in advance that she's a nida, but the invitations went out already, the food has been cooked, the caterer has been paid, etc. That's what you do, right? So maybe that chuppah is not odom aloshna, or is no different. Chibas, when it comes to the fact that they went to the chuppah, that's enough for him to be maknet according to Rav Meir Shapiro. According to Rabbanan, she gets the whole thing anyway, even before the Nesuin. But according to Rav Meir Shapiro, says that she only get everything after Nesuin. What is the Nesuin? We mean the chuppah? Do we mean the bia? Or even if we mean the chuppah, maybe it's only a chuppah that's right for bia. These questions stand. Rabbi Yehuda, so in the Mishnah we had another machlokas. Besides machlokas and the chachamim, we had a machlokas between Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda in this case. What happens? We say a woman is supposed to be either 200 or 100. Let's say a psul is supposed to get 200. She has to have a ksub of 200 according to Rav Meir at all times. If he tries to diminish that at all, it's like it's considered bilas nus. And we pass like Rav Meir. Usually machlokas Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Meir, we pass like Rabbi Yehuda. They were contemporaries, right? We said before that whenever you have machlokas between the Meir and the Chachamim, usually the Blake looked at Rav Meir's Rav Yehuda, they were contemporaries. So usually when there's machlokas from Meir and Rav Yehuda, we pass like Rav Yehuda. Over here, we're going to see we pass like Chacham. You're not allowed to stay married without a full ksuba, meaning a ksuba of 200 for a girl that was originally a psula. So Rav Yehuda says no. If he wants, he can do less. If she agrees up front, she could say, listen, no, I already got some of it. You have to write it 200, but here's a receipt. I already gave you. I already accepted 75, let's say. He says, Morris is a case of 100, just to keep it simple. I already got 75. You only owe me 100 and a quarter. Let's assume that's that. So Rav Yehuda says that's okay. So this is Gemara. So Rav Yehuda says, well, you can write a receipt. Now, there's always a debate about writing receipts, because if you write a receipt, you have to hold on to a receipt. You go into the store, you have a receipt, right? You have a receipt. If you don't have a receipt, I don't know. So you have to hold on to that receipt forever. That's a problem. Not only today things are online and digital, but especially in those days, keeping paper, people didn't have room. Animals, they would have cats and mice and everything. We eat up the receipts. It was hard to maintain paperwork. So here Rav Yehuda says she can write a receipt. Says more of a Rav Yehuda Kosem Shover. Rav Yehuda holds you write receipts for Tanan, Misha Para Mitzvah Chovo. You have a malva and a lova. They lent him $1,000. The lova went and he paid him $200 on account, paid that partial loan. So he still owes him $800, right? So, but what he wants to have proof that he paid him the money. They didn't have canceled checks in those days, right? Even today, I don't know if you can get the canceled checks back. Remember, they would send you all the canceled checks at the end of the month, Today it's all online, right? So Misha Par Mitzvah Chovo, Rav Yehuda Yachlif. So Rav Yehuda says, no, don't write a receipt. What should the Malva write him a receipt for 200? Then it's incumbent on the lover to hold on to that receipt. You lost the receipt, sorry, got to pay the whole thing. So he doesn't write all that. So Rav Yehuda says, no, you don't write a new receipt. You don't write a receipt. What you do is he writes a new IOU for 800. The regular IOU was 1,000. That's what they started out with. He paid him back 200. He owes him 800. So he writes a new IOU at 800. That's what you have to do. Yachlev, change it for a new receipt. True, the date will be different, and therefore the lien is different, but that's what you have to do. Rabbi Yossi Omer Yichtav Lo Shover. Rabbi says, no, you can write a receipt. Write a receipt for the 200. Why? Because it's too bad. The lover has to hold on to the receipt. He's the poor guy over here. He has to hold on to the receipt. And also, this way, the Malva can go after the Lova's lien as a lien from the date of the original $1,000 loan, IOU. So that's what Rabbi Yehuda says. But Rabbi Yehuda says you don't write receipts. So if Rabbi Yehuda says over there you don't write receipts, why over here does he say that the wife can write the receipt to the husband? Okay, you have to write 200. You already gave me 75. Here's a receipt for 75, even though he didn't give her the 75. So does Rabbi Yehuda hold you receipts or not? There it's mashma, he doesn't write receipts, and here he says receipts. Rabbi Yehuda says a very simple answer. You're right, you don't write a receipt. What he does is he writes on the ksuba, on the regular ksuba, which promises, what is the ksuba? The ksuba is his indebtedness to her for the 200. So on the ksuba, they write, I received 75 already. You understand? Write it on the ksuba, so it's not a separate document. It's not they have to hold on to receipt. She has to hold on to the ksuba anyway, or deposit it with her mother or whatever. So that's one answer. So yes, Rabbi Yehuda normally doesn't like receipts, but over here you write it in there. Okay, Abai Omar, no, you didn't write. You write a receipt. Bishlam Mahasam. I'll tell you very simple. Hasam Bari Pare. Over there in the case of the Lova and the Malva, the Lova paid him back the $200, right? So he paid him back the $200. He doesn't want to get stuck for paying him that 200 again. He owes 800. He doesn't have to pay the whole 1,000 amount. So Dilma Mirkas Tavasa, he's afraid to write a receipt. Maybe he'll lose the receipt. The Malva will pull out the original IOU for 1,000 and try to collect Zimnachrin a second time. That's not fair. So don't write a receipt. Tear up the IOU and write a new IOU for the remainder, 800. But over here, did he pay her? He didn't pay her. What happened over here? He's supposed to write a ksuba for 200. What did he do then? He didn't do anything. She just said, "I'll tell you what, I know 200 is hard. Let's get married. I'll give you a receipt for 75." He didn't give her anything. He didn't give her anything. She told him, "Okay, it's as if you gave me 75 already." So she's giving him an advantage. Over there, the Lova is at a real disadvantage. He has to hold on to that receipt, or else he's going to have to pay the whole $1,000 again. Over here, the chassan hasn't paid the kala anything. He hasn't given her $75. Stam, she wrote it to him. So she's giving him a there, so let him write the receipt. He has to eat not if he holds on, if he guards his receipt, it's good. You wouldn't have stuff If he didn't guard it, it's his tough luck. And he's not out any money. The loba is out money. Over here, the chassan is not out any money. Over here, even Rabbi Yehuda would say, let her write him a receipt if it's okay. So Bishlam Abai Lom Kam Yehuda. Why didn't Abai give Rabbi Yehuda's answer? Very simple. Don't write a receipt, just write it on the document, which happens many times here in Israel or wherever. They write simply like, they handwrite on the document, whatever, receive this amount as something like that. You can write it on the document itself. So Bishlam Abai Lom Kam Yehuda, why didn't he say that? Lo Ktani Shavas didn't say that. Didn't say, just said she writes him a receipt. A Mishnah said she can write him a receipt and say, come on, I already got part of it from you, right? It doesn't say that you write it on the ksuba. So he didn't like Rabbi Yirmiyah's answer. Rabbi Yirmiyah might tell him, Rabbi Yirmiyah, why didn't he give Abaye's answer? Abaye is a good svara. In the case of the loan, the poor lova is out the money. If he might lose the receipt, he'll have to pay the whole thing again. But over here, the chassan's not on any money. The answer is, why didn't he give that answer, that difference between the cases in terms of normally Rabbi Yehuda does not like receipts, and here he agrees with it. The answer is once you write receipts, you're going to confuse it. In other words, if you say that you write a receipt here, you'll come to write a receipt elsewhere, and Rabbi Yehuda doesn't like receipts. So therefore, he prefers to say the answer of that the shover is within the document itself. Okay, so all this is, we have a machlokas here on our Mishnah. Rav Meir says you can't do that. Rabbi Yehuda says she can write a receipt, like he gave 75 already, and he only has to pay 125. Rav Meir says no. Whenever a woman does not have a full ksuba, pochis mevsum of a sign, mana, it's considered prostitution. She always has to have her ksuba worth 200. Rabbi Yehuda says you don't have to. You can write this. Time of the kosvele. Wait a minute. So wait, it's only because she wrote him that. In other words, what happens? There's a ksuba of 200. Rabbi Yehuda says if you want, she can write him a receipt. I already got 75, and you only have to pay me 125 if you die or divorce me. Right? Why do you have to even write that for? Time of the kosvele. Aval al peh lo, but not al peh. Amai. It's simply a money matter. You can make a condition on a money matter. In other words, why can't he just say, listen, I'm marrying you on the condition that I'm not going to give you 200, I'll give you 125. Is that okay? Yeah, super. What's wrong with that? Why is that? That condition is okay to Tanya. We learn elsewhere, famous case, you're married to me. The Torah says, right, right, that when a person marries a woman, he has to provide for her. She'er, we said, is food. We different opinions, but the assumption that's food. Ksus, clothing, right, for Va'ona, and he has to live with her as husband and wife, have beer with her, right? So let's say he says, I'm marrying you on the condition that I'm not going to provide any of those matters. No food, no clothing, no beer, right? So Harezim Ukudeshes, but the Rav Meir says you can't make a condition like that. That's called masna mashikas of the Torah. You can't make a condition against the Torah. The Torah, God said, this is what you have to do. You can't say, I'm going to make a marriage without those things. Rav Yehuda disagrees. Rav Yehuda says, listen, yes, with the owner, you can't do that. You can't marry your almanas that you're not going to have any beer. What's the marriage for then? What is that? That's just a joke, right? That's just a joke. But that's not marriage. But the money matters. For example, the issue of giving her food and clothing, that's basically just money. She could be muffled that. She could say, listen, I don't need your food, I don't need your money. I'm independently wealthy, right? She doesn't need his food and money. My job, I earn more than you anyway. Well, I don't need you, keep your money. She could do that, right? So over here, why does Rabbi Yehuda say she can write him a receipt? Why don't you just make a deal up front? I'm marrying you, I'm an ass, I'm marrying 125. Right? She could be mocha that, why not? So for Rabbi Yehuda, ksuba drabanan, like most of us hold, the ksuba is only drabanan, right? The rabbi said it. Why? Since it's only drabanan, the rabbanan made in order to strengthen their power, and not strengthen their power, to give it a higher degree of to give it the higher restrictions. They made a higher restriction over here to give their takana more, to make it more effective. So he says, they gave it a higher restriction more than the Torah. Yosem Mishal Torah. In other words, when it comes to halacha in the Torah, what do the rabbis say? What does the Torah say? you can't be master mashikas of Torah. You can't make it tonight against it. So you can't marry her. I'm not going to have to deal with her. What is it? What kind of a marriage is that? That's not a marriage. But if it's davar shebamamon, food and clothing, she can be mochel that. When it comes to halacha drabanan like iksuba, you can't even be mochel that without writing. In other words, that's what means Torah. By davar shebetorah, he can marry us. Here's your ring on the condition we're marrying. I'm not going to give you food and clothing. You know what? That works. That's fine. No, nothing in writing. That was just the way we did it. That's how we normally do it. We don't do a normal kedushin today. It's not with a star or with bia. It's just simply I give her a ring. I'm not going to give you any food, and she agrees. She agrees, of course. You can do that. But when it comes to ksubah drabanan, the rabbi said you need more than that. She has to write a receipt. You need something stronger. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, what about Paris? What about the fact that he eats her from Nichsei Malud, things that aren't written in the Ksubah? She received a field subsequent to their getting marriage, or it wasn't written into the Ksubah. He's entitled to eat Paris. That's only a Chach Rabbanan. There they didn't say it has to be in writing. The Tanan of Yud Omer, even if he says, I'm not going to eat the fruits of your field, I'm not going to have any enough from your nechasim and from your fruits, he can still eat the Paris, the fruits of the fruits. For example, let's say you sell the fruits and he buys land with it, which is hers, and then he eats the fruits of that. That's like the fruits of the fruits. He can eat until he writes to her. I have nothing to do with your assets, and their fruits, and the fruits of their fruits ad olam. Even though it says over here, the kaimalon on Amid Beis now, and we hold the halacha that my kosek omer. Kosef just means he could just say it. So you see over here, you can make a condition on a halacha drabanan without it being in writing. You're saying that what's the reason why she has to write to him, according to Rav Yehuda, that you're allowed to have a ksubah of less than 200 if she writes him a receipt. As if I already got 75 and you only owe me 100 a quarter. Only if she writes it. Why not just say it? Because since it's halacha drabanan, the rabbanim wanted to give it more stringency, a higher stringency, make it more restrictive to give their halacha more power. Fine. So this is also halacha drabanan Paris, and they didn't say it has to be written. It could even be written in writing. It could even be oral. Amar Abaya. So at the top line on the base, Amar Abaya, no. Everybody has a ksubah of low kodesh Paris. Everybody has a ksubah, but not everybody has Paris. Every woman gets a ksubah when she gets married, but not every woman brings fields and trees and things like that into the marriage. Milsa the shchiach, something which is shchiach like a ksubah of the Rabbanah Chizik. Milsa, they gave it strengthened. They gave it a higher restriction and said it's got to be in writing if she wants to be mochel, right? Milsa of the Rabbanah Chizik, period. Milsa lo shchicha, something which is not as common. It's certainly not as common as a ksubah, which applies to all women. Love Rabbanah Chizik, they didn't make a chizik. Okay, here's one. I'll give you another halacha Rabbanah where they didn't make a chizik. Harei chamorim. What about donkey drivers who come to town with produce? Donkey drivers were usually amaratzim. If they come with produce, you're not sure if they gave trumas or maasros. Truma, yes, that's punishment of death if you eat truma and you're not a kohen, or you eat it the truma. But maaser, not so sure about. So what about the story when these, let's call them, truck drivers, people come to town with the produce. The shchicha, that happens often. The Rabbanan did not make a higher stringency, a higher restriction there. The Tanan, hachamorim, these, we'll call them truck drivers, the balagola, they come into the city. One says, he wants to make the other guy's stuff look better. So he says, my stuff is new. It's not dried out yet. We don't over here mean Chodesh and Yashin with Omer. That we're not referring to that because they're not choshet to eat Chodesh there. But just saying, my produce is not dried out yet. It's still very moist, not as good as the other guys. Go buy his stuff. Or Shalina Matukan, my stuff is not gemaisert. My stuff wasn't tied. The Shalchaber Matukan, and his is tied. Go buy from him. Ain't among them, do not believe. Why? Because we're afraid of what we call gomim. We're afraid that each one says that's like gives you an amanas. And you say, buy here, buy me, buy me. We don't want to buy from you. But if you say, listen, don't buy my stuff, buy his. This stuff is better. That looks like you're telling the truth. And the other guy says the same thing. Go buy from him. So it looks like they're playing games over here. Ain't them, but they're not believe it. Yudam and amanim, they are believed. They're believed there. There's nothing in writing. It's only halacha drabanan. You're worried about demai. Maybe it wasn't gemaiser. And Rudy says he believed over there. They didn't make a higher stringency, even though it's only halacha drabanan. So here this is what applies. So here that's what he's saying. So that's what we're talking about over here. Even though he's praising the other guy's stuff, even though he's believed for other stuff, he's not believing on Demai because you're worried about maybe they're just they have a communion between them. You praise my stuff and I'll praise your stuff, and we'll do better business that way. So here it's a drabanan, and they didn't make a chizuk, they didn't make a higher restriction. Amar Avaya, Vade did the brayim of the rabbanan, something which is for sure drabanan, like a ksuba. There they made a takana, and they said you just can't have an oral agreement; you have to have it in writing. Chizuk, I'm sorry, Vade did the brayim of the rabbanan chizuk. They made a stringency. Suffolk did the brayim. Over here, it's only a suffix, even though Demai is drabanan, but it's only a suffix. They're not sure. Maybe he did take. Maybe most Amaratzim do take Trumas and Maisras. So it's only a suffix. So they didn't make Allah of Rabbanan and Chizik. Rabba says even more than that. Demai Kilu. Demai they were makel because they were more makel by, yes, not because of suffix Ibrahim or Abad Ibrahim. Demai is more of a kula because, as he said, most people do take Trumas and Maisras, even Amaratzim. Rashi points that out. The Rav Me'oretz Masra, most Amaratzim do take Trumas and Maisers and Meiser, and therefore they were more makel even than other suffix Ibrahim. Afilu said, right, even the other ones are suffix Ibrahim, even if they were machmir by suffix Ibrahim, but over here it's even not a suffix because we go basarov and rov Amaratzim is simply a chumra bi'alma. It's not like a halacha drabanan that you can't eat that stuff. It's midrabanan. It's usur, even though it's a suffix. Not because of that. It's simply because it's bechlal. It's just a chashash ma'alma because most Amaratzim do take Trumas and Maisis. So according Abayi's answer is that they made it a chizik when it's a vada. By a suffix they didn't. Rav is saying no. Even if they made a chizik by a suffix, this is less than a suffix. It's only a chashash ma'alma. Yeah.
How do we, what kind of distinctions are making between what we just talked about now, where is there a receipt, not a receipt, and so forth, and the case we had a little while back about the shvua, that is it only an almana that she has to make a shvua that he already gave me 50?
Yeah, that's when it comes to collection. Here we're talking about the deal up front. Okay, that when it comes to the collection, if she's ruined, if she's right, then she has to write. There's no receipt, or if there's a fight about it and he claims I've given it to you already or whatever like that. If there's no receipt, if he has no receipt that he's paid, then she doesn't, the ksuba won't collect. But if she admits that part of it's been paid back, or she's collecting from Yisomim or from a Shabbatim or all that kind of stuff, then she has to make a shvua. Here we're talking about up front. What's the deal? In other words, you're making a deal up front. Do you need to, we're not discussing now the issue of is a receipt valid. Rav Yehuda holds, Rav Yehuda says here she writes, she can write a receipt. And another case says don't do receipts because we're afraid of receipts, rather tear up the shtar. That's one machlokas. Here we're discussing the issue of do you have to write a receipt at all? Why can't you just make the deal up front? So in a chanami, normally you could make a deal up front. I'm an ask that I'm not going to feed you or clothe you. She can agree to that. They don't need anything in writing. That's by a daraisa, right? But by a drabanan, like the ksuba, the rabbanan made a more chizik and said it has to be in writing when the deal was up front. But even by the rabbanan, though, we said only rabbanan that are shchiach, like ksuba, and at least things that are vadai but not suffix. That's why Demai is not included according to Abaya. According to Rabbi, even if suffix is included in the Gzeir Rabbanan, but Rabbi Demai is less than a suffix, only a shash because we go basarov. Rov Amaratzim can do it, and we're more makel by Demai. For example, we give it to soldiers and the people are on the road and things like that. It's only a shash b'yam. So Rav Meir said you can't do this. You can't write a receipt and say, oh, I already got $75 out of the 200. No, whoever kalapoches, whoever diminishes for a psula less than 200, that's it. Now the Gemara doesn't say, Meir's lashon is not kol psula she'ena masayim. Any psula who doesn't get 200 at the end doesn't say that. It says whoever, so to speak, diminishes it up front, writes up front, and says I'm not going to give it, even if she's going to get it at the end. That's considered znus. Even if he just said, listen, I'm going to. I'm only going to give you 125. I'm not going to give you the 200. That's also no good. Even if at the end he has to give it the 200, because that's the halacha. That's the Gzeir Rabbanan. You have to give it 200. And a Tanai like that, Rabbi Meir is batal. Even with Tanai, that's also Almuk Savar, Tanai batal. In other words, if Rabbi Meir would hold that the Tanai is Kayam, except it's Znus, Okay, I made a deal. I'm only going to give her 125. That's all he has to give her, and that's why it's biasness. That's one thing, but it doesn't say that. It doesn't say if you give her less than 200. It says if you make a deal that you're going to give less than 200. Call it poches. The Tanai doesn't really work. It's just in the Tanai he said that. Why? The Islam, she's entitled to the whole 200. But even the Omer lesser. But since he told her I'm only going to give 100 a quarter, Elamana, or give her 100 or 100 a quarter, lo somchadaita, she's not going to rely on that. And she's going to say, oh, everybody else got 200. I'm only getting 100 a quarter. And that's considered prostitution. In other words, unless she feels in her own mind that she's going to get the 200, it's prostitution. Rav Meir holds, we just said that I'm an olive, that if you make a Tanai on anything that Torah said, even the food and the clothing, the Tanai is bottled. So if the Tanai is bottled, what do you mean to say that Rav Meir holds over here? He's going to have to pay her at the end, but if you just made the Tanai, that alone makes it snus, even though he's going to pay her at the end, but the Tanai is bottled. So what's the point over here? He's called bottle. So why do you say that he made the Tanai? The Tanai doesn't mean anything. So not because of that. I'm saying it wrong. But Rav Shapiro, we hold Rav Meir says, if you make a condition against what the Torah says you have to give your wife food and clothing, and you don't do that, that doesn't count. The Tanai is void. The condition is void. But over here, if it's the Tanai is good. What's wrong with that? Why does Rav Meir say that even if you put it in a condition, even if you pay her at the end, but if the full 200, but if you put a condition, she's going to feel that she doesn't have any the money, and she's only getting 100 a quarter, that's considered prostitution. But why can't he make such a condition? Rav Meir holds on a Torah you can't make a condition, but this is a drabanan. So why can't you make it a condition? Remember, Rabbi Yehuda holds you could make a condition. Rabbi Yehuda says you can make a condition, say I'm only giving you 100 a quarter, except he says, you know what? Don't do it orally. Rabbanon Ramachbid, and they said, write a receipt for 75. You're giving it that way with a receipt. Rav Meir said you could do it. But why does Rav Meir also agree over here? Because he only says Mashnikas of a Torah by a condition on the Torah, but the Ksubas Rabbana, it's not the Raisa. So Mashnikas of a Torah to the bottle. So why can't Rav Meir also agree that you can make a condition, only give her 100 a quarter, because it's only Rabbanan? So Rav Meir, Ksubas the Raisa. The answer is Rav Meir holds Ksubas Mena Torah. Therefore, you can't make a condition. In other words, what's the basis on the Torah? Kamar Psul is 50 shekels. We saw by Onas, 50 shekels is 200, is the equivalent of 200. That's a Dal Raisa. And he also, you can't be master on that at all. Can't be master on Shekels of Torah. And the Tanai doesn't work and you owe her the 200. But if she thinks she's only going to get 100 or 100 and a quarter, whatever, that's considered Bilosiknas. Tanya Rav Meir Omer. The Kedushin is Chal.
It is Chal.
The Kedushin is Chal. But it's like Bilas Nus. It's like it means Bilas Nus. It's also to do that. In other words, the Kedushin is Kedushin, but you shouldn't do that, right? Because
really
right, he holds the Tanai is bottle. The Tanai is really bottle. He has to give her the 200, and the marriage is a marriage. But because she thinks that she's not going to get it, because of that, it's considered Bilas Nus. Tanya Rav Meir Omer. Bryce explains it even better. That if you or it's part of like the Mishnah, Rav Meir's part is the same as the Mishnah, but we're going to see a three machlokas here. Rav Meir says, if you reduce the psula's ksuba, and you say I'm give her less than 200, even 199, and almana less than 100, even give her 99, that's considered pilas nos, even though it's a marriage. Rabbi Yossi Omer Rishoy, the Rebbe says you're allowed to make the deal up front without putting it in writing. Like we asked on Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you have to write it. Ratza goes with psul shtar shamasayim because of like we saw in the Mishnah. He can give her ksuba 200. She says, I already got 100, or I already got 75. Well, Almani writes 100 because I already got 50 chamishim zuz. I already got 50 zuz, right? The 50 shekels, the shekel is 4 zuz. Shekel in the Torah is 4 zuz. So she already said, I already got half of that, right? She only has to get 100 shekels. Or 100 zuz, really. 50 shekels is 200 zuz. For an almana, he only has to give her 25 shekels, which is 100 zuz. And he says, I already got it. She can write a receipt. So what's the machlokes? Rav Meir says, you're not allowed to write to her at all that she's going to get less than 200. And if you do, it's a time bottle, but it's like snus. Rav Meir says you can make a condition. It's fine. It's acceptable. Obviously, Rabbi Yossi holds like Rabbi Yehuda, the ksubas drabanan. Rabbi Yehuda says you can make a deal. You can make a stipulation, a condition that you're going to get less, but you have to put it in writing. Says the Gemara of Rabbi Yossi B'Shoy. Rabbi Yossi says you can make such a deal even though you don't even put it in writing for a minute. The Bryce over this like this. You can't sign ksuba nisha. Remember we said yesterday you could have, and the day before you could have signed a certain field to the for the ksuba. Let's say he gives his sons away all of his Yerusha while he's alive. He gives them these fields, and he gives a certain amount that will cover the cost of ksuba from karka. Right? You can do that, but you don't assign metallic, and they tikkun olam because things will work out badly. Tikkun olam means practically things won't work. Why? Because maybe if you give her metallic, you'll give her wallets and jewelry and things like that. It might get dresses, whatever. They might get lost, or their value will be reduced. They'll deteriorate in value. So you don't do that. How are you solving that? He says, how is that tikkun olam? The metallic don't have a fixed amount, and they could be devalued or deteriorate in value. So how is Rabbi Yossi saying different than the Tanakama? Tanakama Nami ain't osin kamer. Tanakama also said you don't assign the ksuba to be paid out of metallic because they can be lost or lose their value. So what's Rabbi Yossi adding on? He's saying the same thing. It's like he's arguing, but he didn't say. He's saying the same thing. This means the machlokas. The Chachamim say you shouldn't assign metallic to pay off the ksuba. That's only if the husband did not accept responsibility in case it's lost. In case it's lost, he didn't accept responsibility. He says, like, I'm assigning this metallic and these dresses and jewelry for your ksuba, and I'll take responsibility if they're lost or stolen, let's say. But if you accept the achrayas, then you could assign the ksuba to be paid from metallic. No, keep it. Even if you accept the responsibility for loss or for loss, still you still should not assign the ksuba to be paid from metallic because there's no fixed amount to them. Even if he says, I'll take responsibility for loss, as long as they're here, that's what your ksuba is going to be paid from. If they're lost, I'll take responsibility. But he didn't take responsibility for being devalued if they're worth less money now. But right, there's no fixed amount of value for them. Posting they could devalue. But nahashta. So that's the machlokas over there. If you can assign metallic or not between the Tanakam and Rabbi Yossi. Tanakam says you shouldn't unless he accepts responsibility. Rabbi Yossi says even if he accepts responsibility for loss, right, for indemnity, you're indemnified if it's lost, but not for their value. The hashta mahos and the dilma pachsi chayish Rabbi Yossi over there. Rabbi Yossi is concerned because it's a possibility that these metallic will lose their value during the course of their marriage. Over here, how can Rabbi Yossi say that she's allowed to accept the ksuba of 100 and a quarter, let's say, a small ksuba? Here she's going to lose 75. Marach over there, where Rabbi Yossi is concerned that maybe the metallic will lose their value. Maybe they'll lose their value. He says that's no good. Here is this body losing the value. The ksuba is not 200. It's only on a quarter. She certainly loses out. Over there, she doesn't know that it's going to be valued. He says, "Listen, your ksuba is 200. Here's a bunch of clothing that's worth $200. This is your ksuba is going to be paid for me. We're going to put it in the storage room now. These clothing." Shabbat says, "How do you know the clothing will be worth 200 when they get divorced or widowed 25 years or 100 years from now? How do you know what they're going to be worth?" So that's not good. But over here, she's accepting the ksuba of 100 and a quarter. He says, "Would you marry me on the condition that I'm not going to give you a ksuba of 200? I'm going to give you a ksuba of 100 and a quarter." And she says, "Yes, that's good enough." According to Yudah, she has to write a receipt. According to Rav Meir, that's no good at all. It's beautiful, but according to Yossi, she can do that, but she's accepting it up front. She knows about it. Can't compare the two. Therefore, it's not a kasha. Achsei to Rav Meir Chama. Rav Meir Chama's sister, having a sister of Avia or of Ivya, she was married to Ivya. She lost her ksuba. She lost her ksuba. Also came for Rav Yosef. They came for Rav Yosef. Amalei told them, "Hachim Rav Shmuel, Sidiv Rav Meir." Rav Meir is the one who says that you can never be without a ksuba at least with 200. Ava Chamomer, that would be Rav Yehuda who argues with Rav Meir. Masha Mesishta Shtaim Shlosham Blo ksuba. You can be without a ksuba too. It's a tkanim drabanan. It's exer drabanan. Remember, we said even if you didn't write a ksuba, she's entitled to it. It's okay. Amalei Abaya said, in other words, the woman's entitled to the ksuba anyway. According to Rav Yehuda, you can even make a deal for less. According to Rav Shimon, according to Rav Yossi, you can make a deal for less than it. Don't even have to put it in writing. Rav Meir says you can't be without a ksuba, but you have to have the physical ksuba, right? That's Rav Meir. The Amaleo called a pochus. Rashi says lebsul musayim alfil b'tanah, but tanai batal. It's called biosnus, even if the tanai is batal. Mishum lo sometimes she doesn't rely on it. B'hachanami Rav Meir who also lishas isha shelf the ksubasa alfil isla. Even if she's going to get it at the end, lo mipsada b'hachi, because she's going to get it's a tanai business. She's entitled to it. Still, she's worried, but she doesn't have the ksuba in her hand. She's worried that she won't be able to collect it, even though halachically she's entitled to it, and the bezin would award it to her. She's worried if she doesn't have the ksuba. So Meir says you can't stay with your wife without a ksuba, right? The chum say no, you can leave it 2 or 3 years, and others you can be without a ksuba. It's not a problem. She'll collect it anyway. Tanai bezin. Look, so therefore that's what Rabbi Yosef said. Amalei Abayev, Amrav Nachman, Rabbi Shmuel, halach Rabbi Meir b'gzeirosa. It was a machlokes Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. We usually go Rabbi Yehuda, but if it makes it gzeira, and what is a gzeira? Rashi says, "But davashu machmer al divrei Torah, al dvar Torah be'isur v'heter al yedei gzeira severing." Made a decree. Decree is a chumrah. You make a decree. You can't do this because of that, right? So Rabbi Meir made a gzeira over here and said, "We're afraid she won't get paid or she doesn't rely on it, and it's like bilusnus, and therefore you pass like Rabbi Meir. You have to have it." Ihochi says Rabbi Yosef, that's the case. Still possible. Go write her a ksuba. In other words, you can't be a woman. It's also it's the halacha. A woman is always supposed to have a ksuba. She's always supposed to have a ksuba. It could be in the safe. It could be here, but she always has to have a ksuba. It doesn't have to be in their bedroom, but she always has to have in her possession a ksuba. If you don't have one, you have to rewrite another one. Zilkos will write her another ksuba. All right. But this machlok is between. We have 3 machlokas. Rav Meir says you can't diminish the amount of the ksuba at all. Rabbi Yehuda says he can diminish it, but you have to put it in writing. She has to give her a receipt. And Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi both agree you can give her less, but Rabbi Yehuda says you have to put it in writing. Rabbi Yossi says you don't have to put it in writing. This is going to be a discussion that we're going to continue with tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem, from Kiyos on the 7th night. Have a good day, everybody.
Those are 200 keys.